Okay, so here we are again working on the 50FB, the miniature 50, and I decided I'm going to give you a little redneck reloading course and bring you up to speed on where we are. Last time we left, basically I had about, I don't know, maybe a few more primers than that in my primer container at the time, and I was just getting started. I loaded up the primer. I was shooting at night, and I was having trouble with my lab radar, so I was not getting any readings. But I was getting some okay groups. I shot, I was shooting 2-shot groups. And I must have put down, I pretty much covered my blueprint paper. So that, in this case, because these things shoot big groups, it's probably about 10 groups. I keep them a long ways apart. So now I'm back. I've actually shot, the reason I showed you the primers is because anybody who reloads knows that that's 100 primers. So I've gone through just over 100 rounds at this point, shooting 2-shot groups. Let me rephrase. Not that it matters to you, but I did about 80 doing 2-shot groups, working up through a whole range of powders, from fast shotgun powder all the way up to Reloader 50. And using 750 grain bullets and 1002 grain bullets. That's what I'm using to set my parameters. And I learned some interesting things about a half a dozen or more powders. And I figured I just now switched out my stuff to Varget from 48.95. I worked my way from the bottom, went up till, basically I went up a couple of steps, then I jumped clear to the top and decided I was going to work back down for reasons of my own. Doesn't matter. Now I'm in the middle, just finished up with 48.95. I'll tell you those results in a minute. But for those of you who ever want to do something like this, I'm going to go back over again. This particular setup, these cases, there's a case turned, ready to go. As it is, it does not fit in the gun, but when I put a bullet in there, it swolls out and stretches back and becomes a very tight fit on the case neck. And so now I have a case jammed in there with a bullet powder ready to go. It's smooth-sided. This is another set of 2. And I got some good enough results that I decided to step up to 4 at about 80 rounds. Total, I decided to step up to 4 cases. So I'm now running 4 cases. And it took me, this isn't fast, but I figured I'd show you that my redneck setup here, just to let you know that I'm getting a fair test, I think. Taking the primers out is a bit of a labor. I take this punch right here and I stick it in and I find the primer hole, which especially out here at arm's reach takes a minute. When I'm up close, I've got to move, and at some point, some of my situations, I've got a primer deal that'll go in there and take some alignment off the case mounts. But anyway, I just found the flash hole, so now I put this on here. I could have a better hammer than this, but this one was here, so I'm using it. Knock the primer out. Every now and again I got to clean up this pile of primers every 15-20 rounds. Now I have a D-primed case. This is kind of a kludgy unit right here, but it primes fine. And right now, I checked my notes here, but I am going for 45, I believe. Nope, 44 grains of Varget. This is Varget. So I take a cup. I just took a guess at this cup. 44 grains of Varget. I don't ever dump it into the cup, but it was just inside. I had to stand up to do this. So there's 44-ish. I don't know if that's 44. I just threw at it. 47.08. Dip and pull. I know I'm going to have to dip and pull a bunch out of here because that's way over. I have to go to a smaller size thing. But I figured I'd just show the whole, every stinking bit of it. From the sizing of the cup that I'm dumping it with. 44.02. So I have a choice. I can either take out one kernel, or because I'm just working up loads, I can leave it at 44.02. I think I'm going to leave it at 44.02. I dump this. I leave one back on there just to keep my scale set. That scale hasn't moved zero for about 3 days because I've kept the temperature in here solid. Now it's going to move zero just because I'm talking about it. But normally it doesn't. So I swapped this out. I must have had a kernel of powder hung up. So there's my 44.02. It's now probably down to 32.98. I mean 43.98. Okay, here's another one. No primer. I deprimed these before. I'll go ahead and load. Wow. I'm a klutz on the camera. So, I went to a smaller thingy-dingy here. I'll take this off. I'll burn it in. I'll put it back on. 44.08. This is a good sized measure. Almost perfect. I pull out a couple of extra grains and I go back and drop a grain. 44.000000. So in this case I spread out. When I dropped, I had one grain left stuck on my finger. So just to make it nice, I decided I'd go for my 44.02 again. Dump this in. So, there's a couple. I'm not going to go through the whole thing and bore you. Now I'm going to slide over here and show you how I seat my bullets with my made-up bullet seater. Don't know if the focus is correct here. And I'll have to get out of the camera because that's the way it works. This right here is a stack of stuff that allows me to seat bullets. I'll put this, it doesn't need focus. But anyway, it is set for a certain length, or because these are so soft, I do it a different way. And in this case, I haven't neck sized these. I forgot that, and I remembered when I seated the bullet because there was no resistance. Instead of that, I just take a bullet. Sorry, these are fitted necks. So I just take a bullet and slide it in and squinch it down. And that's done. 90% of my testing was done exactly that way. I did not seat bullets. Except in the case of 4895, I ran into some, what I call 4895 problems, because I've never liked that stupid powder. I have never, in all my days, come up with a load that I like out of 4895. I've got a... I've got a brand new 8-pounder and a bunch of assorted partials and 1-pounders and what have you. But I got an 8-pounder during the COVID, or the retard times, and just because I could. And oddly enough, when I bought it, even though it was COVID, and even though I couldn't get anything, and even though I'm just fussing about, an 8-pounder came up, so I snagged it for a reasonable price. Powder Valley never raped anybody on anything. So I've got probably 10, 12, 14 pounds of 4895, and I've never used it for anything. But today I'm going to go through and show you my loading technique here, show you what I've been working on. And maybe this will make it worth your time, just in the sense that when you walk up and approach a completely brand new load, you have to have some idea where to start so you don't hurt yourself. And starting something with a 750 grain bullet and a light shotgun or pistol powder is a wee bit scarce. It's kind of, could make a person flinch. So anyway, I had loads. I already had some loads from my fart project, which was the I'm sorry. This is essentially a WSM case. No, it's from the 338 Lapua case, and it's quite a bit fatter, so I presumed it had quite a bit more case capacity. So these cases, which are fire formed from rum brass, were a complete unknown quantity. But these are some of the powders and loads that I used. Actually, this isn't the powders and loads that I used, but from my research with the 50 Fart, I dropped 3 grains, and I wrote that I was going to try, for starters, 20 grains of 800X, 35 grains of H322, 45 grains of Varget, 50 grains of 4831, 60 grains of Retumbo. Then I further added into the mix an unknown quantity that I won't talk about of Reloader 50, because it's here, because I've been working with the 50 BMGs. And I found out a few things. Number one, I found out that the decreased case capacity, which I will call, I was calling it 20%, but I don't know. It's just a little bit smaller than the original Fart. So, I can say that in my workups, I got woof, second, throat, cut. And to get started on all of these, I started with the 650 grain pulled bullet, 645, 650. And I would first get something close, and then I would shoot a few for effect, and I went all the way up through. It doesn't really matter if you're reading here. So, bottom line is, I went out and shot some of these guest loads, and I went through 3 different powders, and it was printing pretty good groups down there. I covered the paper up. But it was dark, and I wasn't getting readings, so I thought, I'll come back. And this is actually 2 days later, to be honest. I came back yesterday, and my target paper was destroyed, pouring down rain. So I went out and put up another target paper, and I started shooting for velocities. And I found out that these aren't that much different than the Fart case. The numbers that I had were pretty much right there. And some of the things, and I also, yesterday, I worked up stuff and I charted. These are just notes. I charted all the way up through to too hot. Here's 20, 24, 28, 800X. Too hot, and this particular one, this was the kind of where I'd left off the night before. The night before I'd been using 20 grains, and it turns out I was 716 to 700 feet per second, shooting nice groups, but way too slow. Oh no, this is the 1002s. I just grabbed part of my notes to show you how I take them. Let's not talk about, but basically, the 7th, maybe I had been shooting, I have to go back through and collate. This is my today's notes that I was pulling stuff off of. I've got about 10 more sheets. So this says that 20 grains of 800X was pushed. It also pushed, I did 645s is 922, 926. And then I shot a second group and I only got 1 reading. This was yesterday. And I dropped straight into the 8002 grainers. I'm remembering this now, even though I shouldn't do this from memory. I did solids, and I didn't know what it was. Then I shot those same loads that the day before had done okay, and they did okay. They still shot. They're just 2-shot groups. But those I actually saved and pulled, and I'll show you, just because I'm at a point where I can, I'm going to show you some of the groups that were shot the second day when I was taking velocity readings. And testing some new powders, understand. This is the target from the second day, not from today, and I hope I can get something to show here. The ones with lines through them are a single shot with a new powder, and this one would be like 750, this one would be 900, this one would be 1,000-ish, and this one. These stacks of groups are from me just trying to find a new powder, which we won't talk about. I'm not going to try to go through and decode, but suffice it to say that in the working range coming up, this is a group, I'm just shooting 2 now. This is a group, this is a group, this is a group, this, if you want to call these groups, these aren't, technically people, these aren't groups. You know, I'm the one that yells and screams and wallers and says, guys, 3-shot groups aren't groups, but I don't care. What I'm doing right here is just try, these are all different powders, and I don't remember, not all different powders, but there's probably 5 different powders on here. And this target is what I consider to be filled up, like I said. I don't have any more spots, so I went down, ripped it out, took it, brought it back, and now there's another target down there, which last night it froze up and didn't rain, so that target is still down. But this is just a representative of what I'm going for here. And the 2 cases that I used are right here. And I'm going to, I'm sorry I'm not looking at the camera. I'm watching, I'm looking down at the monitor at my groups here as I'm pointing my way around, and I shouldn't even have my face on here. I just wanted to get the light right to hold it up. If I put it down here, it foreshortens in the camera. I know that doesn't mean anything except to camera guys, but trust me, if I put a piece of paper that big down here on the table, I'd be constantly adjusting the focus. So let's forget that I even went up there. And during the course of these workups, without getting all explanatory on you, 800X, 322 Varget, 4831 Retumbo, 4895, which as I said was an utter failure. I was trying to start to explain earlier. I've never had good luck with that. But I found out the 4895 is right in the working range, like from just before the case gets full, I run out of powder. I still have air in the case with either the 750 grain or the 1002 grain. But this is one of the reasons I decided I'd better make this video while it was still fresh on my mind. One of these here shows something that is truly amazing. I've told you before how you got to be careful when you're working up velocities. Starting at even at the 800X and the 322, and I haven't even done Varget until now, that's my next round. I decided to swap in 4831 instead. I went, and the 4895, I'm sorry, was out in my shed, so I jumped up to some 50, Reloader 50 that I have here in the shooting room, and it didn't work. I could not get enough in the case, it was retardo. I dropped down to some Retumbo, too slow. I've got here RL50 too slow, 800X is too fast. Oh, I went and got some Ramshot LRT with the CE1 cutting edge 1002s. Too slow. So I found a bunch of too slow powders, but everything was very repeatable. When I brought back out one of these powders out to my powder magazine, I brought back 4895. And it was a showstopper right in the middle of the day. It's in the burning range. Like, it's not too slow and it's not too fast. But as I showed you when I'm reloading, I've been just hand seeding these bullets. Hope I didn't spill any. It really didn't like that. I ran it through the paces with 750s, and then I ran it up to the cutting edge 1002s, and it was the right, but the ES on the 750s with the loose seat was almost 200 feet per second. 53 grains, 57 grains was too long, luckily. I got down to 53 grains where it fit in, and I got 1150 to 1200 feet per second. But that was really, I dropped down to 54. No, I dropped down to 53 and it got low. I tried 54, 1200. I shouldn't even be sharing these loads with you. I'm working around trying to find 1050. But 4895, I wrote here, responds violently. And the weird thing is that at 53 grains, it still was, I got it down to close to the, no, I still wasn't close to the velocity that I wanted. 53, 54, 53, I went down to 50 grains flat and it was still 1154. I went down to 45 grains, but by now I was getting so blown away by the extreme spread that I decided to give up on it. My guess is 4895 is good density, but the ES ain't great. And when I went up to 1200, it's starting to buck like a mother. But bottom line is, it is in the right burning range to get both the 750s, the 800s, the 1002s up to velocity. But I could not get the extreme spread below 35. I've got a 35 here somewhere, and I did that by increasing the neck tension pretty heavily. And I found out that the bearability factor on recoil on this thing is at about 1150. After that, it hurts so bad I wished I'd never pulled the trigger. I got the clap together shoulders and the hard sleeping thing all over again. And I was talking to my engineer kids, and I ran it by my oldest son, and I'm like, I can't even believe the difference. This gun used to beat me up. I increased the weight of the system by 50%. And he goes, well, that would cut the velocity down by 75%. That would bring it down to a quarter. And my jaw dropped, and I said, well, and he's like, well, obviously. And that was one of those things that was not intuitive to me. And I had to rag around and around with him for almost an hour to get it intuitive to where now, maybe I should have known that, but I didn't know that increasing the weight of the gun by 50% cuts the felt recoil. I think I said velocity, because in my head I'm working with velocities. Felt recoil is a generated velocity versus a mass with a mass, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, that 50% increase in the weight of the baby fart, the fart blossom, the 500 FB, results in cutting the recoil down to manageable. So, very good recoil manageability at 1050. This chart here, in case somebody was looking, is my various seating depths with 750 AMAX, 1002 cutting edge, 800 grain Barnes bore rider, 800 grain Barnes LRS BT, 750 TAC LR, 800 grain Lapua solid, 802 grain MTAC, 720 grain MTAC, 762 grain MTAC, 795 grain 10X. I only have 3 more bullets and they'll fit right on here. So this is my chart. So it ended up being a 3-way test. I'm testing the 750-ish class bullets, starting with the 645s, which are cheap. And I've got a range of powders here, and I'm now down to where I'm ready to try Varget, which is a little, I've been holding off on some of these. I use Varget a lot. I'm down, I probably only have 3 kegs of it. So I broke down and went and grabbed a keg of Varget. That's my next thing. I'm starting at 44 grains of Varget. And I'm hoping for something. Otherwise, I'm going to have to drop down into the shotgun powders, because long story short, once I started getting velocities, I established some parameters, and looks like that Varget-ish, 4895-ish powder is going to be where I want to be. Then we can start dealing with pressures, and I'll show a few more of the so-called groups that we're making. We're not ready for groups. And one other thing I found out is that 4895 soots up the necks. It's dirty, nasty stuff, but 150 foot per second extreme spread, are you kidding me? Doesn't work out. So that's the only failure so far, is H4895.